Welcome back to another episode of Mississippi Stories. Got a great guest today. I'm, of course, your host, Marshall Ramsey. I'm editor-at-large at Mississippi Today. Our guest today is somebody I've had the pleasure of knowing for a while. That's how Mississippi works. You tend to bump into each other. But Jack Reed Jr., he joined Reed's in 1980 after several years of being a lawyer in Tupelo. Became the president in 1987. He was born and raised in Tupelo. He graduated from honors from both Tupelo High School and Vanderbilt University, which seems to be a trend in your family. A lot of people have gone to Vanderbilt, and we'll ask why that happened. Being a Tennessee graduate, we want to get to the bottom of that. He also is given so much back to the community, not only being head of boards and through charity, but also serving as the mayor of Tupelo, which we'll dig into as well. Jack, good to talk to you. Of course, at the time of taping this, you've survived another tornado in Tupelo. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you too, Marshall, by Zoom. And it's nice to be in contact with you. Your cartoons always make me smile and think. So I'm sure this conversation will do the same thing.
Good. Yeah, thinking's been a little bit tough for me these days, so we'll see. Hopefully we can do that in the next 45 minutes. But I'm really looking forward to talk to you because not only you've had a really interesting career, and I can't wait to dive into that, but your family too has been a big part of Mississippi history over the last 100 years particularly, and your dad was one of my favorite people on the planet. I was very honored to come up and speak at the library right toward the end of his life. And he made an extra effort to come out to the library to say hello to me. And that meant the world to me. Your dad was just a really special person.
Well, he thought you were too. And good people seem to congregate around good people. So he appreciated you too. But thank you. Yeah, he was a great role model and good man.
Yeah, we lost our dads the same year, and
that's right. I remember that.
And I don't know about you, but I think the thing that I miss the most is just being able. Of course, my dad lived in Atlanta, but I mean, just being able to pick up the phone and call him.
Yeah, one of the things that you don't realize you miss until you have the opportunity to miss them is Dad and I had a lot of, and with my wife Lisa, just a lot of the same tastes in what was maybe on TV. If there was somebody that somebody was being interviewed or some old movie or something, and I'd get a call and it would just be very, very simple, like, Channel 13, Bridge over River Kwai. Like Dad, thank you, or something like that. Just little similarities that you just have in common that you don't really think about until you don't have those opportunities anymore. So.
The phrase I've always heard about him, it was that he was the best governor Mississippi never had.
Yeah,
and I think I would
agree with that.
Yeah, pretty solid.
I know it sounds obviously too personal for me to say that, but just as a citizen, I would certainly say that. I mean, we really never had anybody before that had been chairman of the State Board of Education, chairman of the Mississippi Economic Council, in the Business Hall of Fame, helped start the Community Development Foundation up here.
Yeah,
really cared about everybody. Of course, it was really, really meaningful for us to have him mentioned in the two museums exhibit there through his work with integration. So really, he just had such a broad experience and had a great sense of humor and really could get along with people. Knew how to get along with people. He had a great line. Marshall once during the campaign he. Speaking in Hattiesburg, and a woman came up to him after and said, "Mr. Reed, I never heard you speak before. This is my first time I'd heard all about you." He said, but every right-thinking person in Mississippi is going to vote for you. And he said, "Well, thank you." He said, "Unfortunately, I'm going to need a majority."
That's funny and probably true, but
so I feel that way about some of the other issues we've had that didn't quite get across the finish line in Mississippi. But gosh, what a he certainly would have been smiling at the flag vote earlier this year.
Yeah, I hate he didn't get to see that because he was right in the thick of the 2001, and and I mean I remember just from the reaction I got from some of my cartoons back in 2001. I'm sure he got some interesting feedback throughout that time.
Oh, he got threats, and it was so mean spirited. And this was even before social media. This was just in person, just yelling at him, and our store was boycotted. I took some pride in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, 19 years is a long time to wait. But thank goodness it sneaked across the finish line by one vote. This year that was a miracle on 42nd Street kind of thing, really.
Yeah, and civil rights, obviously, that's something that's affected your life too. You were at Tupelo High School, in fact, when it was integrated, weren't you?
Yeah, that was a great opportunity for me. Intersection is kind of the story of the Good Samaritan. Who's your neighbor, the person you encounter. And I was just lucky enough, really, to be a junior at Tupelo High School when we had the first integrated high school there. We had 2 years of freedom of choice, which meant you could choose to go to either the black high school or the white high school. And no whites chose to go to the black high school, but five very brave African-American kids came to Tupelo High School. And so I had an opportunity to welcome them. In fact, you don't even remember some of these things, but we had a woman now who was a very successful nurse here in Tupelo was telling somebody they were asking about the 40th year of this or the 40th year of that. And she said, I just remember, Jack Reed Jr. came up to my car when my daddy, pulled us up and said, welcome to Tupelo High School. I don't even remember that, but I do remember being able to be in that position. And then we had and if you got a minute, I just have a wonderful story about my good friend Frank Dowsing, who is no longer with us. He's memorialized at Mississippi State now in the, outside their stadium as he and Robert Bell from Meridian, the first two African-American athletes at Mississippi State, but he and a guy named David Adams did the same thing at Tupelo High School. And Frank had, he came over his junior year, and that summer he had been in an automobile accident, and his teeth were wired shut. His jaw was wired till he could get. So he came out, and we were all in two-a-day pads, and he was just in his T-shirt and track shorts. You could tell he looked like an athlete, but the guy, wait till we get pads on. Let's see if he can take a hit. This macho stuff. So anyway, I was firmly ensconced as the B team quarterback. In my mind, I should have been the varsity quarterback, but the coaches, I thought perhaps at one, at 130 pounds and 5'7" was not intimidating enough to the other team. So anyway, I love being the B team quarterback. Well, Frank got his jaw unwired about the third week in September, and our offensive coordinator, Dennis Waite, was the B team coach, and we were going down to play Amory. And he said, Frank, come with us. We ran the I formation back then, quarterback, fullback, tailback right behind it. And he said, Jack, you call the plays and then tell Frank, what his role is on each play. So I said, fine. So we're going down to Amory. We get off the bus. They kick off to us. When somebody runs back to about the 20-yard line, and we come out, and I still remember the play. I said, we're going to run 11 reverse sweep left. And I said, Frank, I'm going to come out. I'm reverse you. The fullback's going to lead, and you try to get around left end. 80 yards later, untouched, as the referee is trying to catch up with him, he flips the ball to the referee, and we're going, yeah, wow, whoa. Well, we didn't have a kicker on the B team, so we always had to go for two. So I'm still out there going for two. I think we made it. Anyway, so I come back to the bench, and I'm just so happy. And Coach Waite, I said, man, Coach Waite, this is great. God, did you see look how fast he is? And Coach Waite puts his arm around me and he says, Jack, don't get used to Frank being on the B team. And the next night, he started it for the varsity. He was so good, he played wing back on offense and defensive end on.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And
our other defensive end, a guy named Rick McCarty, who's a successful architect here, people used to ask him, said, well, how was it when you were playing football on the first integrated team at Tupelo High School? And he said, actually, my role was to slow them up long enough for Frank Dowsing to come around from behind and make the tackle.
Wow. I mean, it's funny when you do play with players like him, you're just like, you realize that he's a man and the rest of you are boys.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's quite a wonderful person too. He graduated sixth in our class of 218.
Oh, wow.
His parents were both teachers. Just a great friend. One of my close friends. Interesting. This is another little story that a lot of people don't know, but that freshman year of college, everybody came back at Christmas, and I saw him at a Tupelo High School basketball game. And I said, we're having a little get together with friends at my house. I'd love for you and your date to come over. And they did. And we, we have a pool table, had a pool table. We played pool, just had a good time. And anyway, the next Monday, my mother goes into the hairdresser. And she said, all of a sudden, just conversation just stopped. And finally, one of the ladies, thinking she was taking up for my mother, said, Francis, I heard that Jack Jr. invited a black couple over to your house Saturday night, and that he didn't ask you about it. And she said, he didn't ask me back because he knew he didn't have to.
Oh, that's awesome.
So glad to have him. So anyway.
Yeah. Let's go back, I guess, to the beginning. Talk about your grandfather just a little bit. Just the beginning of the company. I mean, he decided to move from the suburbs of Tupelo. I'm just kidding. The folks in Itawamba probably are not going to be real happy with that comment. Yeah. But he moved from Itawamba County in 1905, which you got to figure that was pretty darn rural, to come to Tupelo to start a store. Tell us a little bit about that, because I mean, that was a pretty big. What was he doing before he decided to come do that?
He was trying to. The last thing he did, Dad said before he came, was he was selling histories of the Spanish-American War before the war was over. But he was a
salesman.
He loved people. He had a great sense. I just have this on my desk, but this is my grandfather and me. I was 5 when he passed away, and this. Well, let's see. I can't. This shows him they gave me a little cardboard store at like age 3 or something. Making change or something. So
the indoctrination starts early in your family.
Started early. But he just had a great spirit. He loved the community. He helped found the hospital here and was the chairman of the hospital board for 18 years. He just liked people, and he Dad said he probably would have been very if not envious, admired Sam Walton as a small town, Arkansas merchant who just figured out how to do well. But we had the Reeds back then had the first day and night sale during the Depression to try to save the business. They opened 24 hours a day for a week.
Oh, wow.
You may be hearing the train go by in a minute, but
I was hoping that was the train.
Yeah, thank you. We had, and he would hire the mayors of the regional towns, like the mayor of Fulton, the mayor of Amory, the mayor of Mantachie, or whatever, to be the head salesman that night or that day, and they would give a portion of their proceeds to that community's.
Oh, wow.
Under something, yeah, which
brilliant. That's not a train. That's my dog.
I hear you, dog. But he was smart. He just wasn't that. He was as well educated as he could have been. He got 8th grade in Fulton, was as far as they had school for him at that age. So everything else he was self-taught. But they said, my father said my grandfather could multiply 2, 3 numeral digits in his head. So he obviously was a bright guy, but he just loved people and loved the business. So
your dad and your uncle, and I guess your uncle was named for him, your grandfather.
That's right.
So they basically kind of gravitated into the store. Where was the original Reed's located? About where you're located now in downtown?
It was in 1905. It was right across the street next to where Tupelo Hardware is.
Oh, wow.
In 1918, it moved over here.
Okay.
So in fact, I'm sitting in an office that my grandfather used to use. So it's been a, in a way you could say our family hasn't really been that that curious, I guess, to just stay in one space and to be maybe a bigger fish in a smaller pond. I don't know, maybe has suited us, but hopefully we've been able to have some ripple effects of the good things we've been able to accomplish here to share with other people, whether it's the city or the state or the region or even the country in some cases.
Well, I mean, that, like I said, I think what I admire about your grandfather, and I had a great uncle like that too, that started a car dealership that's still in my family's, on that part of the family, that they've been going since 1918. So, I mean,
that's wonderful.
And multi-generational businesses are hard to begin with, but also retail multi-generational businesses are darn near impossible. MR Magazine, which they named, of course, Reed's was one of 42 that had made retail organizations that had made it. Clothing stores made it for 100 years, which that's nothing short of phenomenal, particularly if you take in consideration all the pressures that retail's under right now. I know that's something that, you talk about that. Oh, well, we should have gone out. You're starting to sound like Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life.
Well,
but starting with your grandfather, there was a real understanding that good business means taking care of the community. Yeah,
he just, he just believed that in his heart, and he just acted on it. He and a group of friends, they would just say, well, we had the first concrete road from basically Fulton to Tupelo in the Mid-South, and the business people of Tupelo basically paid for that, and they just kind of said, well, how much is it going to cost? And he said they'd go around, my grandfather say, all right, B.K. Thomas, the pharmacist, we need 500 from you, and Jim, we need 300 from the bank, and they just, that was the way they all just pitched in to do it. And Tupelo is, at our best, we've been the most progressive city in Mississippi, and even one of the most progressive in the South, and a lot of that's come through our race relations successes, although we're not perfect by any means. But there's been there are a lot of good examples of the next, and I'm not even talking about generations, maybe the next decade's worth of leaders coming along and saying, we're going to leave our personal hat on the hat rack, and we're going to look at the community, what's best for the community. And that really makes a difference. And that's not typical everywhere. I remember, and I won't say what town it is, but a town wanted to come up when I was chairman of the Community Development Foundation and talk about our success and see how they could emulate it. And they brought a bus up for the day, and we had a breakfast, well, I guess a brunch meeting, a lunch meeting. We took them around, looked at some of the plants, looked at the medical center, talked about things. And at the end, they said, we talked, shared, and I said, well, do you have any suggestions for us? And I said, well, for one thing, there are no African Americans on this bus. And your town is, what did you say, 60% African American? You get, that's, they just, that was something they were just blind to, really. I guess they just didn't realize that you've got to, anyway, that's obvious. So anyway, I think we've been cognizant of that anyway, again, at our best. My dad had a saying once, somebody was ragging on Tupelo. We were in the top 10 industrial development committees for the third year in a row or something. And somebody was telling him, and he said, don't think less of ourselves just because we think, don't think less of us just because we think so much of ourselves. So, so you don't want to be bragging about it, but I am proud of the successes we've had, even though we've still got a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that, Jack, because like you said, and I wanted to go back to your grandfather because I really, he was chairman of the hospital board, he's the Boy Scouts, his state college board. Just really very community minded back at a time that was before the war. A lot of people came back from World War II and were very community minded and wanted to serve, but he was on the cutting edge. But and I know your dad did a lot, just did an awful lot, and we've touched on that, but what is it about Tupelo that creates that environment? Because y'all have been very progressive when it comes to education. You realize well, that's important for business. And it paid off, like when Toyota came into town, for that area, because basically they knew they could have an educated workforce, for instance, and a hardworking workforce. But what is it? And I've gotten to visit with the CDF several years ago and was impressed with, everybody's commitment to the town. Where did that spirit come from?
Well, I think several places. Number one, we've had a great newspaper, the Tupelo Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal, and its founder, George McLean, was a prophet. And the only, as far as we know, the only newspaper in the country that basically, when he died, gave the newspaper to the community through our CREATE Foundation, our community foundation. And at the time, that was valued at $15 million. That rather than give it to his family, he gave it to the community. So that newspaper, they didn't hide bad news, but the front page wasn't the crime report. It wasn't just, if it bleeds, it leads. I mean, it was always trying to uplift and to prove to people what at our best, what we could be, or to have be aspirational. Mm-hmm. We were lucky to have, at the time, 3 local banks, and that has helped. We now have 2. We've got Renaissance and Bancorp South, newly named Cadence. I mean, that's now still 2 of the biggest banks in the South, headquartered in Tupelo, right across the street from each other. Fortunately, right across the street from our store, too. So there wasn't just a one bank town, and so there was some sense of kind of competition of cooperation. For example, when I was the chairman recently to raise $2 million to double the size of our homeless shelter for the Salvation Army, I asked Robin McGraw, who was chairman of Renaissance, and Dan Rollins, who was chairman of Bancorp South, and Shane Spees, who's chairman of the Medical Center, to all be my co-chairman. And Robin said he'd give 100,000. So I went over to Dan. I said, well, Dan, one of our co-chairs is giving 100,000. How about you? And apparently it worked, so he did that. The Medical Center, the same thing. So we've had multiple hats. We haven't had, until Toyota, we haven't had just that tremendous one company that just was so big. And we haven't had a military, which some cities in Mississippi are, lucky enough to have. But we haven't had a college. George McLean tried as hard as he could to get either ICC to move to Tupelo, but we have an Ole Miss Extension Center, and we have a full Tupelo campus of ICC. So that, and then I think just this spirit of a rising tide lifts all ships. Believing in that, just seeing it happen is important, and that's true. But you've got to be unselfish enough to believe it. You've got to pay your dues forward, in a way, to believe that it's gonna come back to you.
You talk about the next generation of leaders, and one of the problems that obviously is vexing the state, and there's a lot of mamas right now that are not going to be able to see their grandbabies because their kids are moving to Nashville or to Atlanta or everything else. You talk about the next generation. What is it about Tupelo that you think that makes people want to stay there?
Well, that's a good question. And in fact, when I was chairman of the CDF Community Development Foundation, and when I was mayor, one of my highest priorities was for Tupelo to become a cool community. Yeah, been saying that for 15 years, that how important that is, because I think, particularly with, and even accelerated with COVID, a lot of people can live where they choose to rather than where the work is. Yeah. They can make their work where they are. So, and those young people, young families, or retirees, you need arts, you need restaurants, you need healthy places, you need parks and walking trails, and bicycle paths if you can get them. You need when I ran for mayor, I said I'm looking at this like a job application. I said these are my visions for the city. If you agree with these, if you'd like to see these happen, vote for me. If you have a different idea, you should vote for somebody else. And one of them was to be the healthiest city in Mississippi. And I said, now I realize some people think that's a low bar.
Yeah.
For people outside the state, of course, we're all our obesity problems and health problems and diabetes and things. But I said, we've got to start somewhere. And what I did hope we would do then we could scale that if people saw what we were doing. And we built a new music band nature trail while I was there. We won the Blue Cross Blue Shield actually gives an award, which is just kudos to them, because people who like competition compete and competitive. I told the citizens, you will get a competitive person, but if you're competitive for the right things, that's good. I said, I'm competitive for Tupelo. And I used to say, people used to think my last name was Tupelo, Mississippi, because whenever I'm out of town, I'd introduce myself as Jack Reed Jr., Tupelo, Mississippi. But so we did, we did things for everything from diet. We had cattle scales brought in City Hall and teams, so you wouldn't have to be embarrassed about your personal weight. You'd have a team. You had to have a team of at least 4 people or more, and it would be how much combined weight you could lose in 6 months or something. And we had law firms show up, and manufacturing teams show up, and they'd all get together on these scales. 6 people on the scales at the same time, and then we would weigh them, and fun things like that, as well as we had the mayor's marathon where you'd have to run 1 mile a day for 26 days, and you get a certificate from me saying, congratulations, you've completed the mayor's marathon. So I think that's part of it. But anyway, get back to your question about why people stay. I hope that they are doing that. We also, one of my friends in the gay community told me that he thought Tupelo was one of, if not the easiest quality of life places for a gay citizen to be in. There's not, I don't see any judgment going around about that, and that's part of it too. This Richard Florida, who writes about the future, futures, talks about the creative class and how important that is to have a community. So we're trying to do all those things, and part of it too is a good public school system and a good hospital. That's one of the reasons I'm for Medicaid expansion. Gosh, if these towns lose their small hospitals, there are not many reasons to live in a town that doesn't have a hospital.
Right.
Particularly if you're retired or young. I mean, I can't think of any age that doesn't need one. So that's another issue. But that's something I haven't run out of things to be interested in improving. But my children, our son is in Atlanta, our daughter's in Birmingham. So I'm, people could look at me and say, well, walk the talk. But hopefully they are being good citizens where they are, and they care about coming back to you. But part of it, that boomerang too. Maybe we may lose a 22-year-old to go to Houston to work as an engineer, or to Nashville to work in the music business or something. But maybe once he or she gets married and has small children and wants a smaller community, maybe they'll boomerang back to Tupelo at age 30 or 35, and we're having some of that too. So maybe that's something. But it's difficult. I mean, it's a challenge. I don't want to say we've certainly solved it.
You were a lawyer for many years, and then you decided to come back to the family business in 1980. What caused that? I mean, what? Yeah. I mean, you obviously been right back into it's like almost like The Godfather. You just.
Well, it was pretty simple, really. In the retail business, you need young blood. You can be an old store, but people don't come in 2021 and say, "Can I see your 1979 Harchafter Mark suits?" Yeah. So, and my dad and I had talked about it, and I liked law practice. I didn't leave it because I didn't like it, but he just said, we'd love to have you come back in business. If you don't, obviously what I want you to be happy, but if you're not coming back, we need to start looking for somebody outside the family to groom to come in. My sister, Camille, was in the business, but she was a mother and was just working 3 days a week. So she wasn't interested in full-time 40 hours a week stuff too. So I don't mean that to sound sexist, that my sister couldn't do it. That wasn't in her
She had a lot of things on her plate.
life too. So anyway, I went to Dad. I said, well, I took a long weekend off and went with him to a market in New York just to kind of see what he was, doing out of town. I knew what he was doing every day growing up, but I didn't really see what the business was like. Then I thought that was interesting. And I thought, well, I'll just try it. If I don't like it, I can hang out my shingle. Mitch McNutt may not take me back, but I could, I still have this law degree. And in your own business, busy since I haven't really had time to reflect on whether it was the right decision or not, but I think it was.
I think it worked out really well, and for the town too, and for your family as well. All right, so you're an executive, obviously. You give a lot back to the city. At what point did you wake up in the morning and go, you know what, I think I'm going to run for mayor? And tell us a little bit about the differences between being an executive for your own company and being, obviously giving back to the community, and then being the full-time mayor for Tupelo.
Well, without getting into personalities at all, our previous mayor was retiring, so it was going to be an open seat. You weren't going to be running against somebody,
right?
And I always cared about the community, but I never really cared about being mayor. It just wasn't on my bucket list. But I had some friends and some other leaders of the community broach it to me. And I said, gosh, no, I'm just not interested. I've got full-time, I'm happy with what I'm doing now, but I'll be glad to support somebody, let's find somebody. And then about 2 weeks before it looked like the choice was going to be the choice, and I wasn't going to be there, they came back to me again and said, one of the things I really wasn't interested in doing, I'd always been able to give money, not ask for money. And they said, look, we'll finance your camp. We'll raise the money for you. You and Lisa won't have to raise the money if you will agree to run. And then, so that helped. And then I asked Lisa, then I asked my dad, my sister, my business partner in Columbus, what they would think if I took a semi-sabbatical. And they all said, go for it. We think that would be, we think you could be of service to the, you could make a difference. So I did. I ran and I enjoyed the campaign. We went door to door all over Tupelo, saw a lot of the town by foot that I hadn't seen before. Got excited. I'd always been interested in politics. And in fact, Roger Wicker's little stepladder from, I wasn't really interested in state politics, in the state senate or the legislature. I'd been a page down there. It seemed like.
Who did you page for?
Perrin Purvis, Senator Purvis. He may have been deceased before you came.
Yeah, I remember reading about him. Yeah,
he was a senator, a longtime senator from Tupelo. But I was always interested in national politics. And I thought one day that I might be president of the country. But just like play quarterback, I also wanted to play the quarterback for the Baltimore Colts, and point guard for the Celtics, shortstop for the St. Louis Cardinals, win Wimbledon, and then in the off season I wanted to be a report. I wanted to be a TV reporter for those events. So I had a big menu of visions of greatness. But so I enjoyed. I enjoyed a lot of it. It's a hard job. Tupelo has roughly 500 employees. I took the job. I tell you what, before I just back up, I want to say how grateful I was for the vote I got. I was talking about running, whether I was going to run or not. And a friend of mine, Joe Ivey from Kosciuszko, said, Jack, he said, how do you think you could take losing, in your hometown? And I said, Joe, that's a very good question. I had not considered that. But it was a good question. Fortunately, I didn't. I got 70% of the vote, 69% of the vote.
Yeah. Which is huge. Yeah.
Well, more than anything else, was testimony to the fact that kind of, had been, Lisa and I'd been chairman of Habitat for Humanity. I've been United Way campaign chairman, helped start the Good Samaritan Free Clinic, all these.
You had name recognition. Yeah.
The people, and I had different groups of people that, and I think that's one thing. If it's just your little group of personal friends, they can like you a whole lot, but that's not that many people.
Yeah.
I'd had the opportunity to have a lot of different kinds of friends in Tupelo. But if you do it right, it's a big job. I mean, it's a full-time job. And what you really want to do is carry the vision for your city.
Yeah.
And honestly, in America right now, I think mayors have the best opportunity to affect the quality of life in America. And the good mayors, the great mayors are doing that all over the country. I mean, whether it's Oklahoma City or Indianapolis, so you look all over the country, in some of these cities that are just burgeoning, they've got mayors with vision that want to, be for things. And and also our race relations had gotten a bit edgy in Tupelo before I took over. We'd always had good race relations, and our former mayor and the city council had gotten at odds with each other. It was not typical of us. I thought I knew I had the contacts to maybe get that back on track. And then I think people had just started going to Pickwick instead of staying in town and looking at ourselves, taking care of each other maybe a little bit. I mean, people had just the Tupelo spirit had kind of waned a little bit, and I wanted to bring that back. And so one of the things I wanted to do is find something to celebrate. And so I wanted to be an All-America city again, which is like winning the national championship of cities. And so I sent out my communications director as a spy out the first year to Kansas City to see how the winners won, what they had done.
Mm-hmm.
And then we came back and applied the next year. And one of them was, you've got to have a great, energetic opening, and you've got to have this and that. And so we showed what a great Southern community looked like at its best. And we had diverse, we had African Americans and Hispanics and whites, and we had a couple from India, and we had just all of this energy of a small town with a holistic approach. And we walked in singing an Elvis song, to take advantage of that. And then we had a close with an African American woman singing a song about sitting on the front porch at Elvis's birthplace that Elton John had written. And we won. And I was so excited. I was so nervous. The way they give those awards, they're 10 each year. There are about 20 people that make the finals to go out there. But they don't call them in any order. It's not alphabetical order. And it got down to, after 5, we weren't there. And I knew 1 or 2 of them were going to win. One of them was at an Army base, and it was a very patriotic theme. I teared up when I saw their presentation, But when they called Tupelo, Mississippi, I was just so happy. I mean, really, I was just genuinely happy that was something we could come back to town and brag about and say, look, be proud of Tupelo. We're a great place. You be a part of that greatness. Now, and that's, I wish the same thing for Mississippi, of course, and for the country.
Yeah. Yeah, it is nice to have something you can definitely be proud of. And you start with the small victories, but you start with a pretty darn big one. Being a mayor, and I've got a high school friend who's a mayor over in Georgia, a pretty good sized town, and he loves it. I could have probably predicted when we were 16 that he was going to be mayor. He just had that personality. He's a bigger in life kind of guy. But it's also,
I know you were going to be a
24/7
cartoonist
job too. If you can't go out to eat without somebody probably coming and tapping on your shoulder saying my garbage didn't get picked up. Yeah. What were some of the challenges that you felt like you had during your time that maybe you don't really miss so much now that you're retired?
The biggest one was just the intrusions for my wife, for Lisa to she didn't ask for it, and to be a part of it. And I always, even in my church, I'm not bragging about it, but I regularly go to the First United Methodist Church in Tupelo, and the bulletin each Sunday, when I would leave, I would have 5 or 6 things to check on Monday. It was always, Jack, I don't want to call you at work, I don't want to bother you at work, but would you mind checking on the flooding at Lakefield, this sort of thing, and I would just have this list, and I'd get home and Lisa said, I can't believe, that that your friends are loading you up every day. So there is just, you just have to be open to that. I'll tell you a funny story though about it. We had to, our number was listed in the phone book, of course, had been for, ever since we moved back to Tupelo in 1976. But we did have a couple of really mean and one of them mentally ill people that would leave threatening messages on my voicemail. I'm going to kill you for this, or, literally death threats.
Yeah.
And even though Lisa wouldn't answer the phone, she would hear the voice, she'd hear the person saying that. And so she asked me, she said, could we get unlisted? And I felt like I was a little bit, I didn't really want to, because I didn't want to say, well, I want to be available to people, but I thought, well, they could call me if it's city business, they can call me at the office. And she didn't sign up for this. I don't want her to have to, just absorb all these jerks. So anyway, so we were unlisted. Well, there was still a Jack Reed in the phone book. Father. One day about 9 o'clock, I get a call at the mayor's office. Son, you may get a call from a constituent today. I said, yeah. Last night about 11 o'clock, I got a call from a man that was so damn mad, I couldn't interrupt him to tell him he had the wrong Jack Reed. And he said he had a neighbor that had moved in about a month ago with 2 Dobermans that just barked all the damn time. And he said, my wife and I like to go to sleep about 8 o'clock, and we get up about 5:30. My God, these dogs are still barking. I've called the police, and the police say as long as he's got a fence, they can't do anything about it. And by God, somebody's got to do something about it. And I said, look, I don't blame you. Just shoot the dogs and tell them the mayor said it was all right.
Oh, no.
Well, anyway, they didn't call, fortunately. But so, that's humor out of a bad situation. But that's part of it. You just have to be accepted. I will say this, I think it's probably a net negative as far as politicians are concerned, that just the meanness of it, Marshall, is just so, I just don't, we claim to be a very Christian state. And if somebody's listening to this and they think I'm preaching now, I guess I am, but I don't see how you can go to church on Sunday and talk about loving other people and Jesus's teachings, and then just have these irate comments about whatever, politics, people, sexual orientation, these things. It's just terrible. So I didn't listen to that stuff. I had a communications director that kind of, edited stuff that was just, terrible. But I remember one day a lawyer friend of mine said, Mayor, I just want to apologize for what that man said about you on the such website today. I said, it was Otis Timms, Otis Timms probably. I said, Otis, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't read that stuff. I said, I don't have time to be, impacted by just all that negative energy. But that I think that's the worst part about politics now, even worse than when I served. I will say this, this kind of about the future. Vaughn Grisham, who I'm sure teaches leadership at Ole Miss and wrote a book on Tupelo, suggested to me that he said, I wish you would write a book about whether or not you think 4 years of your time was worth it being an elected official, being a business person. And I thought about that a little bit. I haven't made time to even, do an outline for it or something. But I guess what I'm getting ready to say is kind of bouncing back about how bad some of this social media stuff is. It really is important for good people, qualified people to run and take me as a person out of it. I was qualified.
Yeah.
A mayor. I mean, my education, my experience, my business background, and those things, you don't have to be a businessman, but I'm just saying I was qualified. We need qualified, good people to offer themselves. So I really do encourage people to do that. And it certainly was a net positive for me.
And I will say this, just from a guy who makes fun of politicians for a living, I'm going to put that out there first. But it is hard sometimes for people to put themselves out there because they know they're going to get the kind of abuse that you took, for instance, in Tupelo, which, you wouldn't think you would get, but it's not. But I mean, you're right. I think you did touch on something that's really probably the biggest hindrance for a lot of people that are very talented for one to get into it. They just don't want the hassle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You just have to. I did toughen my skin a little bit.
Yeah.
My wife would say I'm too sensitive to criticism. I tell her I've got
That's,
to say that.
every wife will tell you that. I understand.
Yeah, well, you know what? I told her I have a solution to that. Don't criticize me.
How did that
said,
go over? Did it work?
We can take care of that immediately.
Okay, let me try that. Let me try that tonight. So let me write that down.
But I did toughen my skin up about that some, and you need to. I mean, you need to just be able to. And I think of myself as not a puncher, more of a counter puncher. I'm not going to
Right.
try to get in people's faces, but I'm going to defend my town, my family, myself, if it, because like playing church basketball, everybody's fine. You say the prayer before the game, but then as soon as that guy gives you the elbow in the ribs, you've got to let him know you're still there too.
Yeah, it's kind of like the hour before church. It's probably the least Christian moment of the week, very similar to that. Talk a little bit. Number one, I was just going to point out, you talk about Lisa, and by the way, you're like me. You outkicked your coverage. You did really well. She's just super nice, and it's not like when you talk about her not needing to put a. She's been very incredibly active in the community, so it's not like she's shy or anything to that mean. But it was just, I would imagine, like a tsunami.
Yeah. No, she's been wonderful, and really, I don't have a lot of regrets. The only regret I have recently was in 2019, I was honored to be the outstanding citizen of Tupelo, and really it should have been a couples award because in so many ways I've been the wind beneath her wings, and the most important thing I'm interested in is the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, which our son Jack contracted that at age 16. He's 38 now, and we have given hours and hours of volunteer work. She's been on the international board. She probably works as a volunteer 10 hours a week, still every week, trying to help raise money for that organization or help it prosper. And she's been, when I was the mayor, she volunteered. We have these mayor's task forces. She volunteered for 2 of them. She ended up being the chairman of the mayor's task force on education. We have this Tupelo Reads program, which is in its 11th year, which is kind of our one city, one book opportunity. She and I helped found this Music Bend Nature Trail. She's given a lot of attention to that. So yeah, I'm lucky. It's great to have a soul mate, life mate like that to go through. I've always said I'm the luckiest person in the world. Once I told my dad, I said, Dad, I say that, but sometimes I think maybe you are, because you got me to run the store while you go do everything else. But no, I'm so fortunate. That's one of the things that just gratitude is what inspires me to keep being interested in these things. I've got a personal mission statement. It's God wants life to be a party. It's just up to us to make sure everyone's invited to it.
That's wonderful.
That's why I wanted to work on this homeless shelter, doubling it, because everybody needs a safe place to stay, and the free clinic, because everybody needs, health care, and because the United Way thing. So, I mean, that's what motivates me, is I've been so blessed. I know what that looks like, and I know what it doesn't look like for people that don't have it. I had a woman, single mother, crying on my phone Friday that had been evicted, 2 children, no car. Where can I go? I mean, so that's poverty. I know racial reconciliation is probably tied for number one, but poverty almost, Marshall, the older I get, just all of the bad things that are connected to poverty in our state, whether it's healthcare, education, we just got to keep our eye on that ball, I think.
Switch gears real quick, and as the I don't want to keep you too long, but obviously I've enjoyed this conversation quite a bit and could cover about 10 more things. COVID hit about a year ago. I mean, it's hard to believe it's been a little bit over a year now, and it hit suddenly and it hit hard. And of course, it hit your business probably incredibly hard.
Yeah.
You're already facing the pressures from online, and of course, y'all have done a good job being able to create an online presence. Tell us a little bit about the things that you did as a store to be able to there goes Pip again, my dog.
I like dogs. Dogs like.
Yeah, don't worry. No, she's a sweetheart. She just sees apparently a duck outside, and it's making her mad. So, usually she sleeps through these things. So,
well, I'm honored.
It could be saying something. She's awake for you. She thinks it's great. What did y'all do to pivot? Because I know that was probably throwing things against the wall for the first couple months.
Yeah, I was looking back. I kept a journal, and I was looking back at it the other day. Of course, we were closed this day last year. We were closed for about 10 weeks, 2 weeks in March, all of April, and then the first 10 days of May. The first thing I did was take a real hard look at our savings and what we had built up by being good stewards for those, the Bible, the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of want kind of thing. And just looked at how this was before PPP, and I was just looking at how long we could go paying our employees their full wages without any sale. That's a bad business plan, by the way. If you look at our April of 2020, receiving all our invoices for our spring goods with no sales to pay for them, I don't recommend that.
Yeah,
that was the first thing I did, and I talked to my brother who has our investments and told him to take X amount out of our portfolio and put it in cash. So that financial was the first thing I was doing, and then our employees, and then we tried curbside, we tried home delivery. I mean, we did everything we could, just hustling around. Yeah. But with PPP and just not having our people miss a day, our people didn't miss a day of pay through the whole.
That's great. Yeah.
Through us or that. That was the biggest thing. So when we started opening back up, we still had all of our team on board. And I think people around here I know with restaurants they did, and I believe intuitively did with us too, with local businesses, just intentionally tried to, like I know we did with the local restaurants, intentionally just tried to order from them more to keep them going. So I'm optimistic about this year. I mean, we just need everybody vaccinated as quick as we can, but I think people are feeling safer to get out and coming out. So I'm really optimistic about the rest of this year.
You talked about the next generation. What's the next generation of Reeds look like?
Family businesses have family opportunities and not challenges really, but just, we'll just see, I guess is the answer. I've got two, family-wise, I've got two nephews that are in our business. Claude Clayton, my sister Camille's son, runs our two new core. It was called Core Cycle and Outdoor. We have one in Tupelo. We just opened a new one in Oxford, January the 1st, which are more experiences store. They're running, cycling, fly fishing, wakeboarding, all that things to do. Claude's into that world. He's a national champion jet ski.
Oh wow!
Here from Tupelo. So I mean, he's an athlete in that. So he does that. Then Bennett Mize, who worked for Thad Cochran for 9 years and came back to Mississippi when Thad retired, is working at Reed's here and is doing a great job. His wife, actually, Maddie, is working here too. He's my sister Catherine Mize's, Catherine Buzzy's second son. We've got a good young team in Starkville, both Summerford and Christina Bragg, that both worked there while they were in school at Mississippi State and have matured in leadership roles there. So I've got a good bench. There's a woman named Amber Nunley who's stepping in right beneath our CFO here, Clyde Biddle. So I've got a good bench coming, and we'll just see what they what they want to do and what we want to do. It's as my dad said, it's not anything to brag about, this family business, but it's been more than a hobby. It takes work. I was down at the store till 9:15 Sunday night till we got word that the tornado might be coming. catching up. So it's family businesses and your family knows that too. Well, I mean, you're your own business plus Mississippi Today, and I really appreciate everything you do for the state. Don't edit this out, but I just want to say what a positive word and creative person you are. We need people like you and people that are for things. And when these candidates come to me for local races or state races and want money and want support, I ask them, what are you for? I'm tired. I'm not supporting people that are against everything. I want to find people that are for things. That's what I'm committed to, and that's why I was for changing the flag. That made a difference. It's something worth fighting for. That's why I'm for Medicaid expansion. I'm for. One thing I'm excited about, and there are always things to do if you just keep your eyes open. I read about a Methodist church that was doing this in Birmingham, and I've started a diaper bank in Tupelo with the Family Resource Center. You can't buy diapers with food stamps. They're $75, $80 a month for a poor family with 1 or 2 children in diapers, up to age 3. That's a lot of money, and that's a very real problem if you don't have money for diapers. So, I think there'll be plenty of opportunities to keep pitching in.
Jack, thank you so much for spending the time. I don't want to take too much more of it, but I've enjoyed every second of it. And thank you for all you've done for Tupelo and Mississippi as well. You said you like people that are for things. Well, you're definitely for the community, and I think that's shown your whole career. So thank you for
thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and thank you for the kind words about me too. That was nice. My son walked through the room, so it was kind of nice for him to hear that.
Completely unsolicited. I don't have that written down on a card right here.
Well, dang, I'll just have to get rid of that cartoon I just drew of you. Okay, there you go.
All right.
Jack, take care.
Marshall.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. See you.